Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. While the world and those who believe in freedom and democracy mourn the political murder of Russian opposition leader Boris Nemtsov, a state-planned judicial assassination of another freedom fighter and opposition leader is underway in the Indian Ocean. Mohammad Nasheed, the first democratically elected leader of the Maldives, has been arrested on trumped-up charges, denied legal representation, been assaulted by police and faces an unfair trial that will ultimately end in the denial of his presidential ambitions. The organs of the state, under the direct orders of the President, are slowly killing not just the opposition, but are strangling any chances of democracy taking hold in the Maldives. The rule of law is being destroyed, freedom of speech and association are being curtailed, all while Islamists continue to grow their influence in the country, with Maldivans not only joining ISIS, but conducting terror training camps in the country in isolated islands. Mr Acting Deputy President, in October late last year in this place, I spoke about the deteriorating political situation that has engulfed the Maldives since the ousting in a coup of its first democratically elected president in February 2012. The troubles then facing that island's nascent democracy were numerous: corruption in the judiciary, politically motivated arrests, violence against dissidents, suppression of free speech and the press, and the rise of religious extremism. Regrettably, since that time, the Maldives under President Abdullah Yameen has only hastened its slide into tyranny. The police have conducted illegal arrests and searches, allegedly planting evidence, and have breached constitutionally guaranteed rights. The courts have abrogated their duties under the democratic constitution of the Maldives. They've breached the separation of powers, denied rights to legal representation, and abused fundamental judicial processes as part of these smokescreen proceedings. The real purpose behind these actions by the Maldivian state is abundantly clear: to silence all opposition to Yameen's government. I'd like to go back over some recent events to showcase the appalling betrayal by Yameen of his people's freedom and democracy. On the 24th of January this year, Qasim Ibrahim, the leader of the Jamhuri Party, quit their coalition with Yameen's government and sided with Nasheed's Maldivian Democratic Party, citing Yameen's attempts to undermine the rule of law and harassment of democratic institutions such as the Independent Elections Commission. Then, after 21 months of delay, the High Court issued a summons for Nasheed to attend a preliminary hearing on the 28th of January to deal with his challenge to politically motivated charges of unlawful arrest. Nasheed's legal representatives were deliberately misinformed that the hearing would only be administrative. Instead, the High Court scheduled a full hearing and demanded that Nasheed's lawyers prepare new material to respond to issues set to be raised by the Judicial Services Commission. At that hearing, not only did the court order that former President Nasheed, would not be permitted to leave the capital, Mali, even when the hearings were not scheduled, a clear infringement of his personal rights, but the judges timed Nasheed's lawyers with a stopwatch and warned them that they could not speak longer than 10 minutes. Over the following fortnight, Nasheed was forced to attend hearings on various matters, at times without representation, and all attempts to apply proper judicial procedures and uphold his constitutional rights were denied by the court and the tarnished Judicial Services Commission. On the 16th of February, quite strangely, the Prosecutor General withdrew the unlawful arrest charges, stating that it would be subject to review. One may have hoped that that would be the end of the charade against Nasheed, but sadly no. In the kangaroo court approach to Maldivian justice, this was only just the beginning. 6 days later, on the 22nd of February, Nasheed was arrested by Maldives police on charges of terrorism. This is a travesty that Mohammad Nasheed, a former Amnesty International prisoner of conscience, someone who was jailed and tortured 13 times, the person who won that country's first democratic elections, who strengthened freedoms of speech and association in the press, and who invested in transport, social security and law and order, was alleged to be a terrorist. The warrant for Nasheed's arrest did not contain key information as required by law. As such, there's a place or period of lawful detention, and in a highly unusual situation was requested by the Prosecutor General himself. The following day, on the 23rd of February, the Criminal Court scheduled a hearing and advised Nasheed's lawyers that they would not be permitted to attend due to court regulations requiring legal representatives to register their attendance 2 days before a hearing. a feat impossible without means of time travel. The criminal court also refused to provide Nasheed with the forms to enable him to appeal his arrest. This represents an unequivocal denial of Nasheed's right to legal representation in the criminal case and in the partisan show trial which has now been brought against him. Nasheed was not presented for remand within 24 hours as required, violating his constitutional protections and subjecting him to unlawful imprisonment. And then there's the footage of Nasheed being manhandled into the criminal court for the hearing, which is truly shocking. Not only did the Maldives police refuse to allow Nasheed to talk to reporters who had gathered outside the court, but then, despite requests from Nasheed to be permitted to walk freely into court, the police displayed a thuggish brutality in dragging him across the ground, shredding his clothes and injuring him in the process. Despite the unjustifiable force and the injuries, Nasheed was initially refused medical attention. Requests to have Nasheed transferred to house arrest for safety were denied. And attempts to have two of the judges excuse themselves from sitting on the case because of Nasheed's intention to submit them as witnesses to the case have been rejected to date. Instead, the Prosecutor General and these judges have instead given witness statements supporting the charges against Nasheed. As well as this, cooked-up charges of treason have been brought against former Defence Minister Colonel Mohammed Nazim, a government critic. The case against Colonel Nazim shares disturbing parallels with an illegal SWAT search of his family residence, resulting in the Maldivian police allegedly finding a cache of explosives and lethal weapons. These were widely suspected to have been planted by the police themselves to justify the search and charges. Nazim has appealed for open and public hearings in his trial, but so far his legal and constitutional rights have similarly been denied and subjugated as part of the farce that the judiciary of the Maldives is becoming. These arrests sparked protests late last week of up to 25,000 people in the streets of Mali, the capital of the Maldives, organised by the Maldivian Democratic Party and the Jamhuri Party. That would be the equivalent of 1 million Sydney-siders marching across the Sydney Harbour Bridge. The charges against Nasheed have been brought about so that he will be found guilty and thus not eligible to stand for the presidency. Likewise, the law will be changed to bring in an upper age limit so that Qasim will also be deemed ineligible to stand. It is nothing short of judicial assassination. As a friend of the Maldives, I raised my concerns on this ongoing situation with the Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop. I am pleased yesterday that the High Commission in Colombo, which is accredited to the Maldives, issued a statement in which it stated Australia's interest in the case had been registered with the Maldivian government and noted the Australian government's concern with the recent civil unrest in the Maldives following the arrest of Mohammed Nasheed. It encouraged all parties to exercise restraint and act in accordance with the rule of law. I commend Minister Bishop and her office, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and the Australian High Commission in Colombo for their efforts in working towards a solution to this crisis. Australia's voice joins worldwide condemnation of the Yemen government by the United States, the United Kingdom, India, Sri Lanka, Canada, the Commonwealth nations and the European Union. And while I welcome the statement from our High Commissioner concerning the developments in the Maldives, it is important that Australia should look closer at home and the nefarious influence of ISIS in what was once such a promising country, and join with the international community in taking even a stronger stand to ensure the growth of freedom, the protection of democracy and the strengthening of the rule of law. I note that missing journalist Ahmed Rilwan Abdullah, who disappeared 208 days ago on the 8th of August, is still missing, and the government are all but refusing to help the search to find this missing journalist and this critic of the government. If we do not protect democracy and freedom in our neighbouring countries such as the Maldives, we will see that the Maldives, this island paradise, will become the Beirut of the Indian Ocean. Its president, you mean, is already becoming the Robert Mugabe of the Indian Ocean. Thank you, Mr. Acting Deputy President.